it has just recently been announced that Channel 7's video game Let's Plays, reviews, news and discussion show ScreenPLAY, starring Nick Boy, Hex and Miles, has been cancelled after only 12 months in production. They started off in January last year doing the pre-production work, and they started their show in April last year, so it was about 12 months minus the Christmas break that they were in production, and now they have been cancelled by Channel 7. It's been remarkably disappointing because when the actual show was made, it was hoped that this would fill in the gap that Good Game Pocket had left after the ABC had decided to cancel it. And so now, once again, we have a TV show that is on a daily or nearly to daily work schedule that tries to stay up to date with video game news and discussion, and all of the latest games that are happening each and every day has been cancelled. And so now, in terms of Australian video game discussion content, one is left with, as far as audiovisual, one is left with Good Game Spawn Point, and then there are a few YouTube channels which are very small, and there are a few written word websites around the place. So as far as Australian video game news, reviews and discussion, there is very little left now that ScreenPLAY has been cancelled. It has been said on a few forums that the decision by the Channel 7 executives to cancel ScreenPLAY was made primarily because they were unable to find enough sponsors for the show. It was not based on the number of viewers, and I believe that that is probably accurate. When you have a look at the numbers that ScreenPLAY has been able to produce after only 12 months of production, it is quite impressive. The YouTube channel has something like 18,000 subscribers, which is, for a tiny little Australian show, it is quite impressive and remarkable. And then when you look at the number of views that most of their videos get, it is also quite remarkable, ranging from 1,000 to 5,000, and then even a few getting into the 10,000s. And that's only counting YouTube, not counting Facebook and TV as well. So as far as we can tell, there has been a lot of interest in ScreenPLAY as a TV show, as a YouTube channel, and people have really taken to Nick, Steph and Miles, and the amount of fan engagement with the show has been quite significant. And so this would suggest that it is correct that it is the commercial aspect that has failed. The fact that Channel 7 were unable to find enough sponsors for their show, which meant that there was not enough ad revenue coming in that they could sustain it. Now, we can't tell from the outside exactly how Channel 7 managed this and what went wrong, so we are not in a position to say, but you would have to believe that something went terribly wrong for Channel 7 to not be able to do this right. We are dealing with, mostly, for people who are interested in ScreenPLAY, mostly are younger people, and mostly have some level of disposable income because they're able to afford their video game lifestyle. And so this is a demographic that has been very difficult for most advertisers to get their teeth into, because millennial spending habits for younger people 18 to 34 has been very different to the older generations, and so the advertisers know that they have been struggling to maintain this new generation of consumers, and so they should be thinking of how to redouble their efforts to actually gain those consumers through new advertising that is targeted towards this group. And so you would think that advertisers would be crawling all over themselves for this opportunity to get involved with this TV show, which is targeting mostly younger people, in the hope of actually creating a new generation of consumers for their products. And yet the advertisers have not been interested. Channel 7 has not been able to get enough revenue to afford the show, and so in the end they decided to cancel it. Now, this might be the advertiser's fault, or this might be Channel 7 executives' fault, but we just are not in a position to say right now. Another factor you would have to think that would be a very, very significant, very important, was the mismanagement of the ScreenPLAY show that was on Thursday nights or Friday nights, sometimes at 7:30 p.m, sometimes at 11 p.m, and just kept chopping and changing, and often the case it was late at night, 10:30, 10:45 or 11 p.m, when people were thinking of going to bed, and it was not very well advertised, and it was just difficult to stay on top of how and when exactly one would need to watch ScreenPLAY on TV. That was a clear problem, and it was not resolved, and instead it seemed as though Channel 7 were trying to kill the show, deliberately put it on a very bad time slot, it gets low ratings, and then that gives you the excuse you need to cancel it like you want to. And if they're not interested in cancelling it, if they actually wanted to promote it and actually make ScreenPLAY into a core flagship product of Channel 7, then why didn't they do it properly and actually give it a good time and actually force viewers to watch it and see what happened? But we didn't see that. The other factor that needs to be considered is, of course, the careers, particularly of Nick and Steph, because they both left the ABC to do this ScreenPLAY experiment, and they were wooed, and there were long discussions between them and Channel 7, and eventually the decision was made that they would leave, and there was a long, difficult process. It was very emotional, and especially Steph, because she made a public explanation for it, that she wanted to make sure that her career kept advancing. She was worried that as soon as she got older and she became less TV pretty, then her career as a television figure would disappear. And this change of career was her way of ensuring that she would maintain a standing in television for the future. And so you could sympathize with her. She seemed to be making a reasonably good decision based on what she felt was the right move. And I'm totally in favor of her trying to find ways of helping maintain her career and making sure that she isn't disposed of in a horrible manner like so many other women in television have been. So she's did the right thing by her. And then you have Nick, who has continued to advance in his career over the last 5 years, keeps swapping shows. He was on The Roast, then he was on Pocket, then he had made a few appearances on the actual Good Game show, and then he was on ScreenPLAY, and so he keeps going up and up and up in his career. And of course he is married and he has a baby, and obviously he has to make a decision about how his career is going to be advancing forward, and hopefully he makes a right decision what is to do next. It would be terrible if he decides to sell out some of his principles and take up a position within the corporate television bureaucracy and he stopped appearing on our screens, because Nick is such a wonderful entertainer and it would be a real shame if we lost him. The fact is that ScreenPLAY never became the iconic show that Good Game Pocket was, because there was too much of an attempt at maintaining a certain cleanliness to the show. There was a severe attempt at making sure that most of the discussion was very surface-based, not very deep, not very critical, no debate, no deep elaborate hypotheses. All of this detailed discussion was not there, and I have to make a clear separation. The TV show was not that entertaining because the segments were too short, the discussion was only very shallow, and they only got through the very basics before they had to move on to the next segment. And often the discussion and the statements that each of the personalities made was so obvious, so straightforward, that it really did not offer anything to a viewer who had some sort of semblance of an awareness of the situation. And so, unless of course you're completely new to video games and you're not aware of what's going on, you probably would not find the ScreenPLAY TV show that interesting. On the other other hand, especially in the second half, in the 2018 half of ScreenPLAY's runtime, the YouTube channel discussions have become more interesting, more detailed, longer, with more elaborate and detailed points. It had become quite entertaining to watch, and so I was actually finding that ScreenPLAY was picking itself up. It was getting a rhythm, getting some momentum behind itself, and it was actually making great steps forward through figuring out how to actually make interesting 15, 10, 20 minute discussions on a particular video game topic. And so I have to say that as far as the ScreenPLAY YouTube channel is concerned, they were making wonderful steps forward towards creating deep content that really rivaled the Pocket discussions that we saw on Good Game Pocket, especially in 2016. So there is a bit of a contradiction here in terms of what ScreenPLAY was trying to represent within Australian culture, and what Good Game Pocket also became part of, and what Good Game more broadly had become part of, which is the way that Australians talk about, understand and play video games. And it continues to be the case that there is a huge conflict between the orientations, temperaments, ideological mindset of the different institutions in our society. The fact of the matter is that there is a significant but small demographic in this country that is very interested in video games, that plays it, that's interested in it, that wants to discuss it and wants to explore it. And they have at least some disposable income. They can be advertised to, but they are very intelligent, they're very critically minded, but they're also very fun and entertaining people, and they have a lot of things to say. They have their own opinions, they're independent people, and they're not just going to be lectured to. They don't want to be bullied, and they are interested in honesty, they are attracted to genuineness, and they are opposed to lies and snake oil salesmen that might try to lead them down a horrible road. And then you have, on the other side, the television executive, who are very old and who are stuck in their mindset of how old-fashioned television is meant to be made. They have a very structured, bureaucratic, corporate mindset. It's all about production schedules, it's about performance indexes, it's about bringing in revenues, it's about managing and regulating work structures, and it's all about bringing in advertisement dollars. And they have a particular understanding of what television is meant to look like, what attitudes people are meant to have towards television, and what the results of television are meant to be. And so whenever this doesn't come about, they tend to use their old techniques of shoving something into the graveyard time slot, or defunding it, or just cancelling it. And it tends to be that any TV show that does not fit the traditionalist, conservative understanding of what television is meant to be will get this sort of treatment. And it continues to this day that any TV show that does not fit the model, even if it's very popular, even if it has a good following, if it does not follow this model, then it will be cancelled. And television networks, the three major mainstream private television networks, continue to cancel shows all the time once they believe that these shows will not fit the corporate television orientation that they have. And this will just continue to isolate these two groups, because if television networks keep cutting down the shows that have small but passionate followings, then those people will just stop being interested in these networks, and then they will go on to the online sections. You'll have more YouTubers, more Netflix, and they'll just lose interest in corporate free-to-air TV altogether. And so an entire generation of consumers who could be advertised to are just going to disappear, and the private television networks are going to disappear once the generation shift happens, once the older people start to die, or they lose their disposable income, and once the current generation that's in control moves into retirement over the course of the next 10 to 15 years. It will eventually be the case, especially when millennials are able to have more disposable income, income if they get more married, get promotions, and have larger paychecks. And then the television executives will actually want to advertise to these people because they'll become a key demographic, a key cashed up group, and yet they will have no products that will interest millennials, especially video game minded millennials who are interested in new technologies, who are interested in not being lectured to, they're not interested in monological forms of entertainment, they're not interested in just listening and watching, they're actually wanting to engage and become active, and there's nothing on offer in the television networks that will interest them, because as long as television still thinks in the old ways of you create content, you put it on screen, and everyone shuts up, sits on the couch and watches it, as long as they still think in that way, as long as they think that there is a one-way street relationship between content creation and viewing, then that will not interest this younger generation, who are much more interested in dialogue, in engagement, in democracy, in discussion, in active participation. And so television will just disappear if it is unable to adapt to the new environment that this new technology-rich age is bringing us. Then television deserves to disappear, because if you can't adapt, then you don't deserve to be a popular mainstream institution in our society. There is obviously a lot more that needs to be said about this. We need to make sure that we understand what exactly ScreenPLAY represents, what it was able to do for us, how it should be remembered, and exactly what should be the steps going forward. Obviously, that is all important, and we can take care of that over the coming days and maybe even a couple of weeks. But that's all coming ahead, and we need to just remember that ScreenPLAY should be remembered as a very worthwhile and convincing experiment, even though it's been cut down even before it really got into its own stride, because it takes a couple of years of a TV show to actually figure itself out, get its own voice, get some momentum behind it, and actually build up a very large popular audience, and then start experimenting with content, finding the right grooves and the right technique, and actually getting through the production a lot faster because you know it, you're more comfortable with it. And so it tends to take 1 or 2 years before a TV show can really start to turn it on and become the most popular show that it could be. And so ScreenPLAY has been killed off only 1 year into its production before it got into its real higher speed. By the end, it started to get up there, maybe into the 70% or the 80% of speed, but it still had a long way to go before it could have become its full ScreenPLAY potential. To actually realize its potential and become the best show it could be was not there. It did not realize itself, even though it had a goal in mind, even though it had a clear understanding of its agenda, even though it obviously had an honest willingness to experiment and understand and learn and grow and try things. So despite its best efforts, despite its willingness to try things and grow and evolve over time and becoming better with improvements, greater understanding of the situation, despite an awareness that TV shows will often just organically need this. So even if you're not self-conscious of this, even on a subconscious level, even on a human behavior level, it's the case that often it would take 2 years for a show to reach its peak. So on that mark, you'd have to say that we can't ever judge ScreenPLAY on everything that it has done, because the best things that ScreenPLAY could have done will never happen and can't happen because it's been stopped before it will happen. And so ScreenPLAY was the great potential that was cut down before it reached its peak. It's not a show that was cut down in its peak, and it's not a show that was cut down after its peak. It was before its peak. We did not see the full ScreenPLAY. We did not get a chance to experience everything that ScreenPLAY has to offer us. Instead, we have great potential, good organization, good discussion, good gameplay, good reviews, and good news delivery content, all that was well structured, well designed, very entertaining, very funny throughout, but did not reach that golden peak of potential. And so I have to say that as far as what has existed, as far as what has been produced over this last year, it has been very much worth the effort. Nick, Steph and Miles should be very pleased, and the people behind the screen, especially Will and Pete, should all be very happy with what they've done. They have produced a year's worth of television content that has been wonderfully entertaining, wonderfully informative, and to a certain extent carried the torch of Good Game Pocket that was left over. Certainly ScreenPLAY never reached what Good Game Pocket had, but that is mostly because it was only 1 year when Pocket had 2. So Nick, Steph, Miles, Pete and Will all deserve huge congratulations for all the work they've done over the past year, and we just have to hope that they're able to find new jobs in the coming 6 to 12 months so that we can see maybe another show that comes up that takes ScreenPLAY and Pocket's place, and we continue to see Australian video game news, discussion, let's play and reviews on some sort of audiovisual platform. So that's all I have to say for now, and I will keep everything else that I have to say for a later date. I obviously have a lot more that I need to say. There's still my more thoroughgoing discussion and critique and conclusions about what ScreenPLAY actually was able to achieve, but I'll save that for later. In the meantime, I think what I've discussed today should suffice as a starting point to what we can say as far as writing an obituary for ScreenPLAY, because that's all that we can really do over the coming days and week, because no new show will come for many months now, and so all we can do is just think about what ScreenPLAY was to us, what it represented, why we cared about it, and why we are disappointed and frustrated now that it has gone. Thank you.